Hello everybody. It's Sunday, so that means it's a mixed media day. I'm going to have a play around with a tag that I created. Now, I started doing this about 4 weeks ago where I just added some stones to it, and I haven't done anything since. So we're going to get this finished now and turn it into a piece of artwork. I'm using PVA glue because that's what I had to hand, and I'm just spreading it on randomly. I'm going to add some more art stones. These are by Finnabar, but you can get them from other places. They're just little fine granules of a lightweight stone. They're leftovers from glass making, but they work so well for adding texture and all sorts of dimension to your pieces. I'm going to dry them off as best I can, and then I'm going to add probably another layer, and just keep going until I'm comfortable with it. To clear up these art stones, because they're so small and they run all over the place, I use sticky tape. It's just much easier to grab up those little particles as you go. So sticking with drying things off, because it's still not dry, I'm then going to add a layer of gesso over everything. Just gives me a blank canvas to work from rather than the tag which was left over, which I've covered with a modelling paste to just even it out a bit, and like I said, those art stones, because it was a piece that I wasn't happy with. So absolutely covered in gesso, and we're just going to keep going and get it dried. There was one thing I noticed whilst I was drying this off. If you mix PVA and gesso whilst it's wet, it puffs up, which adds even more texture, and it splits. So I started to peel these layers back. It added so much more texture, and you will see that in the final couple of images where you can see where I've peeled it back, sort of folded back, because it makes an almost skin-like texture. Now, I was going to add some clear gesso, but mine has completely dried up, so I went back to the white gesso and just added white gesso where I've peeled the stones back, where I've peeled that layer back. So I'm still working on a white background for when I do eventually add all that colour. And I really enjoyed playing around with this. It's one of those happy accidents that you discover when you're just screwing around with paint. I'm using, this is actually a kebab skewer, to just pull the layers back, because that mixture of gesso and PVA gets very, very hot, and the stones retain a lot of heat as well. I don't want to burn my fingers, so between the kebab skewer and a set of tweezers, I've got to that point where I'm not going to burn my hands. Now we're going to add some colour. Now the gesso and glue are dry, and I've started off with a colour palette of yellows and pinks. So I've got a baby wipe, which I'm just using to help mop up some of the colour, so it's not hugely intense. It's not as intense. I've got yellows, oranges, pinks, peaches, that kind of thing. I'm just going to keep adding them in layers, drying some off, mopping bits up, just really playing around with it. And as they dry, the colour becomes lighter, because as you add colour, it doesn't always stay as vibrant once it's dry. But we're just going to keep adding it until we get something we're happy with. Right now, it was far too light for me. The nice thing about the sprays is it gets into all those nooks and crannies, and using the baby wipes means I've also got those baby wipes to play around with later. But it doesn't have as much depth of colour as I wanted. So I moved on to some Heidi Shine mists, which are again highly pigmented, and some ink infusions by Paper Artsy, which are basically a dye, a granule, which when you add water, it becomes, well, paint almost. And as you can see here, that's a lot of colour I'm getting off that. So Lindy's Stamp Gang also do something similar, I think. And again, I'm just mopping up so that I don't have so much liquid, moving things around, letting it drip, letting it shift. I'm going back in now with some more orange and some more yellows, because I've gone in with the purpley pinks and they've become very intense. So I want to balance that out with some of the orange and the yellow, because I want that dual colour palette in there. It takes a little while to get this to a stage where you're happy. And obviously, lots of paint, lots of dye, lots of ink in there. I'm using a heat gun to help speed up the drying process. And the plus side, like we had before with the wet PVA glue and the gesso, we've still got some liquid in there from the inks, so we start to get that rehydrating and puffing up and adding even more texture. And to add more colour to the bits that I really want to add colour to, I can go in there with a paintbrush, as you've seen. So now we're going to get this completely dry, because working wet on wet on wet on wet just starts to meld everything together, it starts to slide together, and it's not a lot of fun. So I'm going to head through some photos. Now this is a photo of me and my dad when I was a toddler. Can't have been that old at that point. I'm going to cut me out of the photo because I have an idea that I think will work really nicely. I'm adding foam dots to give it dimension, because of all the dimension and texture I already have on that, it's not going to stick down because of all the texture unless I use the foam pads. So now I've finally finished removing the backs of the foam pads, I can stick things down. I'm also going to add some thread to the back because, well, one, why not? B, adds more colour, more texture, and just starts to look pretty cool. I did consider giving myself a little halo, but that just didn't look right to me. So whilst I'm playing around, I'm also going to get a sticker out, which is Create, and just add that on some foam dots as well. Just something a little bit different, just pulls the eye in. And like I say, I'm messing around with paint and paper a bit, so why not? It looks right. These little petals are actually from some watercolour paper. Not watercolour as in watercolour painted paper, as in it's a watercolour effect paper. I've just cut them out and I'm going to just glue them on. And finally, I'm going to add some gold and brass. Now these are, oh, what on earth are they called? These are by Finnabar. They're waxes, they're metallic waxes, and I'm just going to apply them with my finger. They smell delicious, by the way, and it adds a pop, adds some shine, and really helps to move that texture forward, as you can see in the photos. And then I've called it finished. I've called it done. It was an experimental piece where I learnt quite a lot, and I really enjoyed making it. So if you liked this video, please subscribe, join me next Sunday for more mixed media, and check out my scrapbook process videos during the week. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye!